complaint comes in,
Right.
complaint
Block
filed
stamp. Should be block stamped, not always block stamped either.
in, stamped, and if my discussions with the village attorney, in addition to code enforcement, the fact that we have the rental registry law, we're able to both write the landlord and the tenant with regard to the violation, and then let the landlord and the tenant fight it out in justice court. As far as we're concerned, if the garbage cans aren't where they belong, it's $100 fine. Who pays it? So long as it comes to the village, I don't really care who pays it. So we'll follow up with regard to that, but that's what the procedure is supposed to be. If it's not being done, we'll make sure
Well,
that.
it's all I'm asking, because I leave these things and I walk and I see and nothing changes. So either they're backed up or they haven't gotten to it, or it's not as important as other things. But
I
I'd still like it to be
will,
addressed.
oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, no worries,
I
I'm
will
done.
tell you though that there are certain matters that may become more of a priority
No question
with
about
regard
it.
to that.
I
But it
got
shouldn't, at the same time, that doesn't necessarily mean it should be swept under the rug. It's just that it may not happen as fast. At the same time, if you're saying you've been doing it for months, that's also, there's no excuse for that either. So,
I left one there the other day. 2 years ago I wrote about it. And here, let me just back up and say that last summer I was putting windows in my house as an aside. And somebody called code enforcement and said I was using an unlicensed contractor, which I was not. All right? So that was July of 2017. Everett called me the other day, told me he was clearing out his old violations and wanted to ask me. And I said, well, I had a licensed contractor, it was Anderson Windows, and it was addressed because Tom came out and straightened it out. So that was 2017. In 2016, I left a code enforcement issue regarding something on, I think it was 20 Briar, where there's wires dangling. Those wires are still dangling, so I just put in the complaint again, and we'll see if it gets addressed. That's my point.
I
Well
just
taken.
wanted to say, if this gentleman did not know that he's supposed to take his garbage cans up from the curb, that maybe there are other people who don't know, so maybe we should put the notice again in our newsletter. Because
Next.
if he didn't know, there were gonna be other people who didn't know. You take those garbage cans and you get them out of the right of way, and you get them out of your driveway, and you move them up.
name and address for the record.
Tim Conlon, 4 New Actortown.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Excuse me, can you just say that again slowly?
Tim Conlon, 4 New Actortown.
Thank you.
Welcome. Is the village going to do anything about picking up the large amount of tree branches and sticks, other than the 4-foot bundle that you put out for the trash?
As a result of the storm you're talking about?
Yeah,
The,
and maybe some more that are coming our way.
well, technically, if the tree came from your property, you're responsible for disposing of it. As a matter of courtesy, Ramapo was coming around, and there is, I'm told that they're gonna be doing another wave, possibly through the village. They had used the National Guard at one point. That there may be another wave of them coming down to take away more trees. However, as a practical matter, if the tree fell on your property, you're responsible to cut it, bundle it, and then put it on the curb. My suggestion is that for just practical purposes and to help the waste people, that don't put everything out all at once. Like for instance, I had maybe 8 bundles of trees that I had to cut up and bundle. I'll put out 4 or 5 one day, and then I'll put out the remaining the following week or something like that. But we, as a village, first of all, don't have the ability to collect large trees and branches and stuff like that. But also the town of Ramapo, also, it's really not their job to do that. As a courtesy, they will do it for private property up to a certain point. If it's on a public right-of-way or something of that nature, different story. Orange and Rockland or Ramapo will come and they'll remove trees in the public right-of-way. But if you had, unfortunately, a big birch tree that fell down in your backyard, you're going to have to cut it and bundle it. And if perhaps very close to the storm, if you want to call Village Hall and see if we could, we'll start to kind of accumulate a little bit of a list, and if we can get to you, we'll try to get it.
Okay.
but we just don't have the
Well,
ability to do that.
Clarkstown, just for the record, Clarkstown does it. They have an annual
A lot of villages
stick
do it. A lot
pick
of
up
villages,
day and-
they're more
and-
equipped to do it. We are not.
They have their own
Unfortunately.
village
And since
report.
the
They have
taxes
their
are
own
so
public-
low, you know, maybe we could look into the
Well, they have
budget
their
for
own
next
public-
year and
They
Well,
have
we
their
don't-
own public works.
We don't have a DPW. We contract with Ramapo to do our public works. We don't have a public works department. We don't fix the roads. We don't fix the storm drains and things of that nature. We contract. They fill the potholes. They'll sweep the streets for us and things of that nature. They'll trim trees that are in the public right of way and things of that nature. And that's always been the case since the village has been a village since 1986.
I thought they did it once after Sandy. I thought there was a pickup.
As a courtesy,
courtesy.
they did come around. The thing was, they don't continue doing that. Like I said, if you've got substantial trees down, and if, again, I don't wanna make any promises, but if you call Village Hall, they'll touch base with Ramapo, Highway, and if there's a way for them to come and help you, we will try. But they're not gonna necessarily come on your property in your backyard and drag it to
No,
the
no,
front or
no,
something
no,
like
no,
that.
no.
But,
Yeah, just put these
look,
piles out by the
yeah,
road.
we'll try to do what we can do.
We work together and,
Yeah,
yeah.
and we will
okay.
try to do that.
Okay, good. Okay, second point, is I live on New Ackertown Road. 2 houses down from me, there is this massive construction project going on, which is brewing. It's hot. And I have seen various things about this project. I think it's 1 Caro Court, maybe? Is that the one?
Yeah, that was brought up last meeting, yes.
Right. And from various sources, I see information that comes my way, as well as since there's only 1 house between me and this construction project, I see a lot of what goes on. And I've seen some of the plans, seem to be the architectural plans. I noticed there's a huge swimming pool going in, like an inside swimming pool. I noticed that there has been inspections of the property so that there's some sort of a study group or a study hall now in the garage. I'm just, everybody, we're gonna build the schools that everybody needs. But if there's a community center going up in a residential neighborhood, don't we as neighbors get to comment on that? That's point 1. And if apparently we don't get to comment on it because they've already started building this community center, then could you just tell me, with your legal background, what is the proper way that a neighbor can get on the record with the authorities, whether it's the building inspector or the mayor or whoever the legal authorities are that approve these projects, to question it?
Well, first of all, you're doing, number 1, coming to meetings such as this. Number 2, you have access to the building department file to look at exactly what's going on, and you could review it. You can make copies of it and, within certain parameters, and you can show it to your own privately retained professionals should you wish. To my knowledge and to date, there is no community center going into that house. What you think is going to go there, you're welcome to think it. But currently, there is no community center there's no community center being built that goes in that house. There have been some issues with regard to the foundation and how what they're doing now and that what they may do, maybe
What's
possibly
the
down the
indoor
line.
swimming pool?
Excuse me?
You're allowed to have an indoor
An
swimming.
indoor mikvah is not against the law.
What's a mikvah?
It's a ritual bath.
Jewish ritual bath. So, the bottom line is that.
But it's a bath? I mean, sorry,
Yes.
So it's for bathing,
Correct.
but it looks like it's an indoor pool.
It's a
Yes.
ritual mikvah.
And you're
That's
allowed
the
to
law.
have it.
So for how many people would be bathing in there?
It could be for whomever's in that house, and it's part of their religious practices. So, that being said, the application is on file in the village. It was brought to the attention of the board, to code enforcement, and, at the last meeting. And we are in the process of keeping an eye on things. And we are in the process of following up with regard to the property to make sure that the plans, what was approved. Now, what complicates things a little bit, this goes back a couple of years to a previous building inspector. The village engineer at the time did approve some parts of the plan, but what we're in the midst of doing now is kind of getting it up, bringing it up to speed, because there's been some changes alleged to have been made from the original plans to what's being built now, and we're in the process of figuring that out.
Okay, I just, having done a small building project myself, and having been through the process of putting in a permit application, and meeting with the building inspector, you know, he was all over me. And, you know, he checked the depth of those footers, and he wanted to know every I was dotted and T was crossed. So, okay, so if I feel there's something amiss with this,
You're welcome to, you look at the plans.
Is my recourse to just to come to the meeting, or?
Oh, no, then you're welcome to ask the question, you're welcome to contact whether it be us or through the building department, say, look, you know, I'm a neighbor at 1 Caro, and I wanna know what's going on. From what I saw in the plans, this is what I saw. Am I seeing this? And then you'll be able to speak with the building inspector.
Or I
Or
see
code
this,
enforcement.
and that's not in the plans. And you should go out and see that they're not following the plans.
You just have to make sure that the question that you wanna ask, after seeing the file or seeing the site, is, you can reconcile it. Look, our staff is here for us all, you know, but we've kind of, I think, gotten to a point where a lot of people feel as though it's you versus us. We all live in the village, you know, we're all here for the same reason, and we all want the village to be a great place to live. So we are not adversaries. I will tell you, as sure as the sun will rise tomorrow, we will never be able to please 100% of the folks here. But I assure you, with my last breath, that I will try, and we will continue to try to address the issues in a fair way and in a thorough way, so that everybody so as a village, we're all together. That's the best I can do for you.
Okay, appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Conlon.
You do have to know that we have very large, in general, large pieces of property. For example, I live on a half an acre. And with the law, which shocked me, but it's the law, you could put on a half an acre, without any variances, a 5,000 square foot house. Which means it could be a 4,000 square foot house and a 1,000 square foot indoor pool. It could be some combination of both, but because we have large property, that amount of floor area ratio is allowed under the law. It has to be built to specifications, it has to be on the plans, it has to be whatever it is, but you'd be surprised how big we're allowed to build.
What is that number?
Without getting too wonky, Mr. Conlon,
Yes.
there are certain bulk requirements that you are permitted as of right, which means that because a house may look one way in its current condition, the zone that you're in, it could be a little bit, you can make it bigger.
It depends on the
You're
zone.
only seeing perhaps what was built at that time, but
Right.
they're permitted to go bigger with that. So what's gonna end up happening is, a house which might have been smaller in scale at origination of the village or when it was built, can probably expand 30, 40, 50% maybe. I'm just coming up with numbers. So you just have to also, and what the deputy mayor's saying is you have to just kind of take into account the fact that the zone that you're in
Right.
will dictate the bulk of the building, that's all. And it may be bigger than what you're accustomed to seeing, but just because it's bigger doesn't necessarily mean it's not permitted.
Or that the ratio changed.
Correct. Correct.
Right? They're just using
It-
more of that ratio.
It's
more
to
of-
scale, it's
Okay.
just that it's bigger.
Got it.
Okay?
Okay.
So.
I have a couple of questions. My
Sure.
first question is with
You
regard
have to
to,
repeat your
I'm
name.
sorry, Sabrina Martin, 2 Barnwood Road. My first question is with regards to my observations of minutes, what has been brought to this village board meeting as concerns, and what has transpired thus far, with 3 Spring Hill Terrace being an example. Looking at the minutes, the village raised concerns about what was happening there. And the response was, well, this is what they said they're gonna build. If it's gonna be something different, then we'll have to see when it happens. You know, we only have a few eyes here. We're relying on you as a village to be eyes as well, bring things to our concern, correct? Then there was a suggestion made several times about a building moratorium. I don't know if I'm saying that correctly. Right. And the response was, well, I don't think that's necessary right now. If it gets to the point where things get out of hand and we can't maintain track of what's going on, we can't monitor it appropriately, then we will consider it. We can't monitor the buildings, you know, what's being built, and make sure that everyone is complying with the law, we'll consider it. That's what I remember reading in the minutes. So my question becomes, trying to understand, to the extent whereby we're saying that we need the village members to be our eyes and ears and to help with looking and help the code inspector and help the building inspector. Not everyone in the village has the time to go around and do the code inspector's job and the building inspector's job. It's overwhelming apparently. A lot more is going on than what everyone can keep up with. And 3 Spring Hill Terrace is a great example of that. So I'm just trying to logically understand why we are not seriously considering a building moratorium so that we can get our hands wrapped around what's actually going on in the village and maintain some sense of control with regards to what we would like to preserve.
A building moratorium, and I have said this numerous times, a building moratorium is when you have large swaths of property or you have a zoning code that is so antiquated or that it is so in need of being brought up to date that you say we need to take a breath from building. A building moratorium is not to be utilized because someone feels as though that this particular building being built shouldn't be built. So we're going to put a stop on every building permit in this village because we don't like the fact that a particular building was built the way it was built or whatever the case may be. That is not the use of a moratorium. And as a matter of fact, if a village wrongfully utilizes a moratorium, they leave themselves open to liability with regard to preventing someone's right to do what they're entitled to do. Now, you're right, you read in the minutes about the moratorium coming up. But perhaps you didn't see in the minutes, again, the basis upon which a moratorium is properly utilized. The fact that 3 Spring Hill came up was not appropriate for a building moratorium. I can't comment too much on Spring Hill because there's still a threat of legal action with regard to that property. And I'm not going to compromise the village with regard to that subject. But I will tell you that 8 out of 10 times the issue that the village faces is not with the zoning, it's with the enforcement. Okay? And enforcement is something that we need to go out and we need to police in a more efficient way. I do not argue with you with that. This is not rocket science. I understand that. I could probably have 15 code enforcement people in this village and we would still have issues. However, I am confident that my code enforcement staff is trying their best. There may be question from folks whether they agree with my assessment, but I see what they do every day. I see what they do every day, and they are trying their best. Can we improve? Yes, we can. However, they're doing their best. Now, so code enforcement, I agree, we need to step it up a little bit better. Building moratorium, I still, to this day, say that it is not appropriate for this village, because we are fortunate. We have been very evolutionary with regard to our zoning. We do not have instances where builders are coming in wanting to do something to play fast and loose. And when I say builders coming in, I mean large developers. I don't mean a person who wants to knock down a house and build a new house. So that's what a building moratorium technically is for. And I've addressed Spring Hill. You bring up very good points. And this is something that the village has to contend with every day. And we're never going to be able to address it 100% because the village is an evolving thing. And every day we have to do something more. So we're never going to be able to crack the code, but I assure you, we're going to try to progress with it. But point well taken.
I'd like to address what you said about us saying that we need other people to be our eyes and ears. Well, you know what's going on next door to you. I don't know what's going on next door to you. I know what's going on next door to me. And so if you think that something that's going on next door to you is not correct or is not being done correctly, you have a better chance of reporting it than I do, because I just know what's going on my street. Do you understand what I'm saying? And that's why we say we need the residents to say.
To who?
Okay, so let me
To
just,
the village.
let me respond to, thank you for sharing that. I think I do a pretty good job of reading, and when I read the minutes with regards to the response to the building moratorium, the response was pretty much what I just stated. That, you know, so I will go back and look again.
I would, it's a couple of
But I don't,
you
so
gotta
if
go
you're,
back a couple
if you're
months.
saying that, I read quite a few of the minutes.
All right.
And this is the first time that I'm hearing that.
It may not have been as specific as we would have liked. We'll have to look at it ourselves. But what the mayor has said, he said that multiple times, it's just not appropriate for a moratorium.
And we've had many
It's not, he
discussions.
didn't say that it's not appropriate because it's only with regards to major building projects.
Look, I know what I said.
Okay.
I know what I said, and I
Okay.
know the purpose of the building moratorium, and I think I defined it a
I
couple of
hear you,
different
I hear what
ways.
you're saying, I hear what you're saying. So I don't wanna argue, I'm
Well,
just,
I'm not
I just like
arguing
to
either,
go
I'm
back.
just letting you
yeah,
know.
yeah.
You're telling me what you read,
Right.
and I'm telling you what I said. So,
Open. And
hopefully
I
the
guess-
two will
I guess
reconcile.
Hopefully it will,
Next
hopefully it
question,
will,
please.
yes,
The minutes are not a transcript.
okay.
next
Next
question.
question. There's a new zoning law that's being considered, and I guess there'll be a public hearing with regards to establishment of residential, neighborhood, and community places of worship.
Correct.
Right. Can you help me understand why we feel the need to revise those laws? Have we been in a situation where we have violated anyone's rights, religious rights to establish places of worship?
Again, as was reflected in the minutes in the past, we've had to look at the neighborhood worship law because as it is currently set up, there is one square hole for 5 acres or more. And the way the law has developed, the way the village has developed, the way the close to 8,400 residents in this village has developed, necessitates that the village on a periodic basis revisits its zoning laws and comes up with laws to better address and to evolve with the way the law is. The current law that we have for neighborhood houses of worship is just one cookie cutter approach, 5 acres, and that's not appropriate. Because if you want to have a house of worship in your home, the Constitution says you could have it, and you don't have to have 5 acres, okay? The Constitution says you can have it. Now, whether your neighbor is all for that or not, well, that's your neighbor. But the Constitution says you could have it. So what this law will do is, this law will better provide the parameters within which an applicant for a neighborhood house of worship will get a proper hearing and will also notify their neighbors of what's going on so that the neighbors can come and say, hey, by the way, perhaps we need less lighting, we need more shrubbery, we need some of this, we need some of that. It is to provide assistance, and it is to provide a better community response to a need that is in the village and that the law allows you to have. Has there been a problem? There has not.
Right,
Will it be, yeah.
right. So this particular proposal defines 3 different types of houses of worship.
Correct.
Residential, neighborhood, and community.
Correct.
Right.
And we're gonna have a hearing on that.
I understand.
What?
I understand. Okay. And I respect what's written, okay? There's no confusion about it, but except, just again, questions. And I think in particular what's written here is, because of particular limitations with certain religions, where on their Sabbath or their holy days, they're not allowed to drive. There's a need for residential and neighborhood houses of worship. I believe that's how I interpreted this,
It's one of the reasons, sure.
right? That's, yeah.
It's one of the, that's,
Right.
that's
So-
not
so
unique
my-
to just,
Right, no, I know, I
it's for
just want to
every
make sure.
religion.
Sorry?
It's for all religions. It's for all
Is that
religions.
particularly for those religions that are not permitted to drive?
Ms. Martin,
Right.
it's for any religion that chooses to have a neighborhood house of worship in the village. Any religion, any religion.
That's not how I read it.
Well, that's,
Okay.
the law
That's
is
not
not geared to a particular religion. The law is geared to every
I didn't say
religion.
particular religion, I said
Oh,
to
no, you
particular
just said
laws,
it.
to
You just told me.
particular, how the particular religion, practices with regards to their house, with regards to the Sabbath.
There are certain.
Okay,
there
I'm
is-
gonna find that section.
Sure, I know exactly what
because
you're
I didn't
talking
know, I didn't know
about.
that you were gonna question that. So here's my question,
Sure.
okay? With regards to religions that are not allowed to drive
Right.
on their holy days,
Right?
help me understand why. And which is the reason why we're establishing residential and neighborhood houses of worship, because that's clearly defined as separate from a community house of worship. Okay, you have residential, you have neighborhood, and you have community.
Right.
So I'm assuming that we have the residential and neighborhood ones so that those who are not allowed to drive can walk to their house of worship on their holy days, no?
But also,